Every year, airline CEOs go on earnings calls and tell you the same story. Fuel costs are up. Margins are razor thin. The business is brutal. And every year you go to book a flight and somehow it costs more than it did the year before, with a smaller seat, a $35 bag fee, and a snack you now have to pay for. So here's the question nobody in the cabin is asking out loud. If this industry is genuinely struggling, why does it keep getting more expensive to fly? And if it's actually thriving, why does every airline executive sound like they're one bad quarter from bankruptcy? Both of those things are true at the same time. And once you understand how, you'll never read an airline earnings call the same way again. Let's start with the number airlines love to put on a slide. The industry's net profit margin. In 2025, the global airline industry made roughly $39.5 billion in profit on nearly $1 trillion in revenue. That's a margin of about 3.9%. To put that in context, that's thinner than a grocery store. It's thinner than most restaurants. Per passenger, that works out to less than $8 of profit per person, per flight. Less than what Apple makes selling you a single accessory. Airlines have used that number for decades to justify basically everything. Fee hikes, smaller seats, cutting a free snack, laying off workers, delaying refunds. The logic is always the same. We're barely surviving, so don't ask for more. But here's the thing about a thin margin. It's not the same as a struggling business. A thin margin can also be the symptom of a business that figured out exactly how much money it can extract without you noticing, and then plowed the rest right back into keeping it that way. So let's actually follow the money, because the story airlines tell you about where their revenue. For most of the 20th century, an airline's business model was simple. You sold seats. The ticket price covered your costs, and whatever was left over was profit. That model nearly killed the industry. Fuel is volatile, competition is brutal, and ticket prices are the most visible, most comparison shop number in the entire economy. If United raises fares $20 and Delta doesn't, you book Delta. That kind of competition keeps margins thin by design. It's not an accident. It's the entire dynamic of the ticket business. So airlines did something quietly brilliant. They stopped trying to make their money on the ticket and build a second business hiding inside the first one. That business is the loyalty program. And I don't mean the points you use for a free upgrade every couple of years. I mean the actual financial machine underneath it, which has almost nothing to do with flying and almost everything to do with your credit card. Here's how it actually works. Delta doesn't really sell miles to you. It sells miles to American Express. Every time a Delta SkyMiles cardholder swipes their card at a grocery store, a gas station, anywhere, Amex pays Delta for the miles that get credited to that purchase. In 2025, that single partnership handed Delta $8.2 billion in cash. Not revenue tied to flying anybody anywhere. Revenue tied to people buying groceries. That $8.2 billion now exceeds what Delta makes from certain categories of ticket sales entirely, and it made up roughly 10% of the airline's total revenue for the year. American Airlines pulled in $6.2 billion from its own co-brand deal with Citi. Alaska Airlines gets 16% of its total revenue from loyalty spending alone. United leans on Chase. Southwest sells most of its points straight to JP Morgan. According to Delta's own CEO, the spending on its co-branded card alone is now close to 1% of the entire United States economy, flowing through a single airline's loyalty program. Sit with that for a second. Roughly one out of every $100 spent in America runs through a rewards program for a company whose core business, according to its own earnings calls, barely breaks even. That's not a struggling industry. That's an industry that built a bank inside an airline and told you the plane was where the money was. And this changes the entire incentive structure of how these companies operate, because a business that makes a huge chunk of its money from card spending has a very different set of priorities than one that makes its money from happy flyers. If your real profit center is convincing people to open a credit card and keep spending on it, then the actual flight experience becomes almost secondary. It just needs to be good enough to keep you loyal to the card. Squeeze the seat. Charge for the bag. Delay the refund. None of that threatens the $8 billion check from American Express. If anything, charging for everything on the plane just makes the free checked bag perk on the credit card feel more valuable, which sells more cards. This is the part where the fee structure starts to make a lot more sense. Airlines made a record $157 billion globally in 2025 from what the industry politely calls ancillary revenue. Bag fees, seat selection, priority boarding, the works. That's more than double what airlines made from the exact same fees back in 2016. United alone pulled in $1.3 billion just from seat selection fees and another $1.2 billion just from checked bags, and that was 2 years ago. The number's only grown since. And here's the twist that should really bother you. During the same period that fees exploded, the actual average base airfare, adjusted for inflation, fell by roughly 40% compared to a decade earlier. Read that again. Flying got cheaper. Flying got more expensive. Both headlines are true, and they're describing the exact same decade. What actually happened is airlines unbundled the ticket. They took what used to be one price that included a bag, a seat assignment, and basic dignity, and split it into a dozen smaller transactions. The base fare drops, so the flight looks cheap when you're comparing prices on a search engine, and then the fees quietly rebuild the price on the other side of that search, well after you've already committed to buying. It's not that flying got more expensive. It's that airlines figured out how to make the sticker price lie to you legally. So now you've got two engines running behind the "we're barely profitable" headline. The credit card machine and the unbundled fee machine. Combined, they're generating well over $200 billion a year in revenue that has almost nothing to do with the core, competitive, thin-margin business of selling seats. And both of those engines are, by design, largely invisible on the number airlines actually report as their headline margin, because that headline margin is calculated across total revenue, fees, and loyalty cash included, which is exactly what lets the number stay looking modest even as the profit sources underneath it get more and more lucrative. But there's a third piece to this, and it's the one that explains why airlines can get away with any of it in the first place. Because none of this works if you can just switch to a cheaper competitor the way you'd switch grocery stores. Since 2008, the U.S. airline industry has consolidated down to basically four major carriers controlling the vast majority of domestic capacity: Delta, American, United, and Southwest. That didn't happen by accident. It happened through a wave of mergers that regulators approved during and after the financial crisis, when airlines were bleeding cash and consolidation was framed as the only way to keep the industry alive. Delta absorbed Northwest. United merged with Continental. American merged with U.S. Airways. Each merger was sold to the public as necessary for survival. Each one also happened to eliminate a competitor, tighten capacity, and give the surviving airlines more pricing power on the exact routes where competition used to keep fares honest. This is what economists call capacity discipline, and it's the quiet skill the entire industry has mastered since then. Airlines don't need to collude to raise prices. They just need enough consolidation that nobody has to. If there are only two carriers flying a particular route instead of five, neither one needs to undercut the other because neither one is scared of losing the whole route to a competitor. They can raise the base fare a little, strip out a few more amenities, charge for a few more things, and just wait to see if you actually leave. Most of the time, on most routes, you can't. There's nowhere else to go. So here's the picture once you put all three pieces together. A consolidated market that limits your ability to walk away. A fee structure that hides the real price of a ticket until after you've committed. And a credit card machine sitting quietly underneath the entire operation, generating billions of dollars that have nothing to do with how full the plane is or how good the flight was. Every year, the headline margin stays thin because that's the number that justifies raising fees again. And every year, the actual sources of profit that matter most to these companies grow a little further away from the thing they're actually named after, flying you somewhere. None of this means airlines are lying when they say ticket selling margins are thin. They usually are. That part's true. What's misleading is treating that one number as the whole business, when it's increasingly just the loss leader that gets you signed up for the parts of the business that actually make money. It's the same trick a grocery store pulls when it sells milk at a loss to get you in the door, except the door here is a boarding pass, and what they're really selling you on the way in is a credit card that'll be charging you interest long after the flight lands. So next time an airline CEO gets on an earnings call and tells you the business is barely profitable, they're not exactly wrong. They're just telling you about the one part of the business that was never supposed to be the profitable part anymore. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the community. We've got more insights like this coming your way every week. Give this video a like if it changed how you see the airline industry, and share it with someone who loves to travel or hates hidden fees, grinning face with smiling eyes. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Have you noticed these changes when booking flights? Let's talk about it.